Good afternoon. Hello, everyone. Thank you for listening or for watching. My name is Jamie Pugh, for those who haven't listened before. And what we're trying to do on the podcast at the minute is bring together health practitioners or nutritionists, sports scientists, researchers, just to ask them about what it is they're doing, their area of expertise, and how we can take some of that information and use it and what it might mean in the world. So as part of that, it's awesome to have on today someone that I've collaborated with and I've published research work with is the newly appointed as well, Dr. Ben Kirk from Liverpool Hope University. Ben, how are we doing?
Good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Looking forward to this. It'd be great to get into the study you've just had published. Before we get started, Ben, do you want to give a bit of a background about yourself and what you've been doing the last few years?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me on, Jamie. I've heard good things about this podcast so far, and I've been looking forward to coming on. So as the listeners can probably guess, my area surrounds sports science, nutrition, kind of overlaps between the two. Much of the areas of research, or the fields at least, that you've been doing. So I did an undergraduate in sport and exercise science initially, and then I went on to do a master's in clinical exercise physiology. That's just looking at basically the diseases of the body and how through exercise we can play a role at curbing those diseases or at least preventing them. And then my PhD, as you mentioned, surrounds aging research and looks at dietary protein and the effects of exercise. So what we did at Liverpool Hope University was we ran a clinical trial and we wanted to look at the effects of exercise alone or either combined with dietary protein on overall muscle performance, and we did that in comparison to a control group as well. So if you like to call it a big experiment over a 4-month period, we did some measures at the start and afterwards to see what were the benefits of exercise either alone or in combination with dietary protein.
Perfect. So let's just jump straight into the meat and the bones of this study. So just to give us some specifics then on those two interventions. So if we look at exercise first, when you say exercise, was this that you prescribed exercise to them? Was this that you had them in? And what exercise specifically was it?
Yeah, so we got them to do strength training, so resistance exercise, and they did that twice a week. And then on one of the other days, they did functional exercise. So as the name suggests, it just involved functional components. And that was to more look at or improve agility, balance, and to practice activities of daily living, really. So things like movements of getting out of a chair that can become more difficult for an adult over the age of 65 as they keep progressing with age. So they were the exercises that we did, and the rationale behind them was that we know a disease called sarcopenia, which is the Greek word for flesh loss. We know that that's becoming more prevalent in this category of adults over the age of 65, or at least when you hit the ages of 80 and those latter ages. And with the aging population, we are seeing more adults live longer and in that age category. So we're trying to keep their mobility upheld, really. And we know through strength exercises is one of those exercises or activities that can hold on to your power, your strength of the muscle. And this isn't even to be lifting heavy weights or something, Jamie, you and I would do. This is actually just to uphold their daily activities so they can get out of a chair, they can walk across the road. And most importantly, it's to prevent injurious falls and fractures, which can really be really detrimental to an older adult, and it can stop hospitalizations, etc. So that's what we're trying to do through this study. And that's why the rationale for those exercises.
Yeah, and I think it's important. I know we've already mentioned it's important to stress that. So the participants in your study were, we won't say old, we'll say older. They were slightly frail. So in terms of the practicalities of this now, I think it's unbelievable that you managed to get so many older people. So, and these weren't regularly attending the gym or anything like that. These weren't already taking part in resistance training. How did you convince them, if you like, to one, get involved in the study and that they should be doing this, and then to get them doing something that probably is something that they wouldn't normally have done anyway. How did you manage to get them to do that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So obviously we all have to, when we're doing recruitment in these studies, you have to follow ethical principles and stuff. But overall, we took a cohort of older adults that were physically untrained, as you mentioned, so they hadn't taken part in any structured exercise per se in the last 6 months. From the beginning, if I remember, we recruited through aging charities, word of mouth, etc., GP referrals, etc. And once they started getting enrolled on the study and they saw the kind of benefits, or at least they liked the training elements, then more were coming and coming. And it was basically through a word of mouth. And what kept them ongoing, I think, throughout the study was the social element. And that was the key thing. And it's even to this day, they say that it's the social element was the driving factor of them engaging in it. And now that the trial has ended, they've also seen the benefits, or they've seen the benefits on themselves with regards to mobility. And they've looked more into the diseases that can happen with older age, and that can, what we call mobility disability nowadays, that can happen in that age category, and how they can offset that. So yeah, it was the social element, going back to your original question, what drove them to take part in the study, or at least stay engaged with it.
No, so yeah, I think that's huge. So if we come, that's maybe the exercise bit initially taken care of. So if we just switch now and think about the protein. So a couple of questions on this. One, do older adults need more protein, or was it a case of getting them up to maybe the recommended amount? What was the rationale behind adding protein in as well?
Yeah, so that's another good question. So shorter term studies.
Oh,
excuse me, sorry, Jamie.
No, it's okay.
That's my iPhone taking a drop in there. So shorter term studies have shown that our muscle, when we hit that age category, maybe above the age of 50, 60, it needs more dietary protein to hold on to the muscle tissue across the lifespan. And obviously, if we can hold on to that muscle tissue and maintain the quality of it, then we can hold on to our physical functioning. So in the UK here, our recommended amount by the government at the moment is 0.75 grams by your body weight. But through these short-term studies, or at least some other long-term studies as well, have shown that older adults need more dietary protein. And that is because the muscle just becomes a bit more resistant to it. Like everything with age, we get a decline in all our organs. If we think about our brain, our heart, the functioning of all these organs just goes down across the lifespan, even when we're not talking about disease here. And it's the same really with muscle. It just becomes more resistant to absorbing that protein and using it in comparison to a younger counterpart in their 20s, let's say. So we need to be giving a higher threshold of protein across breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or at least these short-term studies have shown us that that's the case. But of course, if you want to implement and inform guidelines, you need to prove it in these randomized control trials. You need to have firm evidence of that. And the evidence at the moment has been conflicting, really. Some studies have shown benefits, some haven't. There's a number of rationale or a number of explanations for that. Probably one of them is because the adherence to taking in that extra protein throughout those trials hasn't been as good as we'd hoped. So that was our rationale. We gave this higher quantity of protein, up to 1.5 grams by your body weight. So that's really nearly double the quantity of what the government recommends at the moment. And then we wanted to look at the effects of that, as you mentioned, with exercise, and then independent of exercise as well. So we gave a group of older adults as well protein intake 3 times a day, and they had no exercise, because we wanted to see, again, if we go back to the real world here, what about older adults that they're constrained from performing any exercise, so they have medical conditions, they could be hospitalized, or else they just don't want to take part. So they don't seek those benefits. We wanted to see, can protein intake on its own offset some of this muscle performance loss, if you like to call it in a very non-scientific way, to see if that can help prevent disability.
No, this sounds really good. So that's the overall design of the study. But I suppose as it goes on, the implementation of it, let's just go back to the exercise part to begin with. So you've got these older adults, they're coming into the gym, they're lifting weights. Is it just a case of them lifting weights, or was the program prescribed to hit certain movements? Was it heavy, light? Is it important that they go to failure? What sort of considerations were you taking into account? And I suppose then, off the back of the results, which we can go into in a bit, what does that mean to the real world? Because is it just a case of doing anything, or is it, there are certain things that you need to try and hit?
Yeah, that's a good question. And without getting into the nuances of exercise science, which we love to talk about and things, really based off previous studies again. Sorry, Jamie, geez, I'm having a disaster here. Based on previous studies again, they've shown that lifting lighter weights to your maximum effort or lifting heavier weights both can ultimately build strength and build muscle, what we're trying to achieve here. So there's more than one ways to skin a cat with regards to building muscle. It can be just lighter weights or heavier weights, but again, you just have to provide that effort on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being nothing, you're sitting on the floor, 10 being you're lifting maximally a weight. So that was our rationale of doing that, and we used lighter weights because we thought if you take a section of the population that are over the age of 65 and they haven't ever performed any strength work previous, we thought they might be intimidated a bit by lifting heavier loads. And if we know we get the same benefits from, let's say, moderate or lighter, then why not try that? And also, if you look at the prevalence of musculoskeletal aches and pains in that age category above the age of 65, it's quite high. So that was another one of our reasons that we thought maybe going for this moderate to lighter load might be beneficial for them, or they might like it more. So we showed that it's very effective, in line with lots of other previous studies that have done that. There was nothing new that we've shown, but our population of older adults, they really liked it. And that is shown as well by 6 months after the trial had finished. I wanted to see, did this group of older adults that had never trained before, and we've taken them and we've trained them, we've improved their health in some ways with regards to these muscle performance measures, but what about when they go back and live in their normal life again? Is that going to translate over? And that's actually what the most important thing is how we inform public health and how we implement this into public health. And we looked at their exercising rates 6 months after the trial had finished, and 86% of them, of the overall that finished our study, were still performing either strength or cardiovascular based exercise. So we found that finding was quite promising on its own. If you consider worldwide and you look at surveys and you pile them into one big pool together, there's actually under about 10% of older adults that perform any exercise. So obviously you're seeing the benefits here for them of curbing, let's say, muscle weakness in the UK. It was recently shown that per case of muscle weakness can cost the NHS over £2,700. And if you compile that all together, it's around £2.5 billion sterling a year in the UK. So what we've done here, we've taken a group, we've shown them how to exercise, they've taken that into their lives, we're hopefully they'll continue to do it, and they'll prevent diseases, disability, but they're also, from a financial point of view, serving our National Health Service a lot of money and the government.
Yeah, of course. And as you said, it's just showing them the basic principles of going to failure on an exercise, even if the weight is light relatively. It's progressive overload, so showing them that over the course of a few weeks, if you were lifting 2 kg dumbbells for 12 reps, we go to 14, or 3k dumbbells. Those simple things that, as you said, maybe you and I take for granted, and so we're maybe more interested in the molecular physiology of why it is getting stronger. But the older population in general, is just, what should I do when I go to the gym, and making it fun and making it social, and so showing them that this is something that you should be doing, and these are the benefits that you'll be getting from it.
I completely agree with you, and that's from our population that we worked as well. That was the big thing they said, that it was all about how do we implement this, or what can we do to keep going forward and prevent this. And we've now shown them that, yeah, just picking up a weight and doing it regularly and just going to that effort level, is going to do all the things that we want to do. It's going to strengthen the muscle and it's going to improve your physical performance. And also, if you do it over time, it's going to end up with muscle hypertrophy. So it's increasing the size of the muscle tissue. And if you keep that active, that tissue, we know that the muscle tissue is the largest storage site of glucose, which is just basically sugar. And that can curb prevalences of diabetes, type 2 diabetes specifically, that we know is actually highest amongst the ages of about 65 to 80. So having more muscle, and at least active muscle, not only is good for to prevent disability or mobility issues, but also to curb or maintain insulin sensitivity, make it sensitive so you can stay away from diabetes or you can offset that.
Yeah, no, and as you said, it's just how do we now get these messages across to regulatory bodies or anything like that, we can start to action it. But if we go into results then, so let's say we're already discussing here that the exercise had, lots of different benefits and a lot of different measures that you took pre and post the intervention. But if we look at the protein as well, so in the group that only took protein or in the group that exercised plus protein, did you see additional benefits there, or could you get away with just eating protein as opposed to having to do the exercise?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in our study, we didn't show additional benefits of the added protein. And one of the explanations for that is the compliance with the supplement that we used wasn't as good as we hoped, basically. That's number one issue. And also another issue is our population that we took, their baseline protein intake was a bit higher than the government. So that's another reason. So I think if we took the same population, but they were taking in the government's recommendation, then we might have seen those benefits. But some other studies have been released recently and they have shown benefits of taking in protein alone on reducing or on muscle performance measures. So even at that, taking in more protein, if you aren't going to exercise, it is still beneficial. But for curbing disability and disease, to me, exercise is king and nutrition is queen in that arena. As in, it's all about the exercise if you want to hold on or maximize your benefits of muscle performance.
No, I think that's key. And as you said, there's studies that are showing benefits of protein, and no doubt there are some circumstances where, if an adult or an older adult has been debilitated for any length of time, then maybe increasing protein in those instances could at least offset some of the damage that might occur while they can't train. But as you said, I think the most important thing is just making sure that people are getting into the. It doesn't even have to be the gym, I suppose, just some regular daily activity.
Definitely. They've even shown now that some forms of walking with advancing age as well, you can get some fat tissue that actually goes inside the muscle and it actually goes inside the bone marrow as well. And then it starts disrupting all that healthy tissue and healthy bone. And they've shown that even regular walking can actually reduce your chances of that happening, of that fat going into the bone and into the muscle as well. So there are some benefits already. But one thing as well I think it's important to note is after the age of about 40, naturally our bone and our muscle mass is going down at a small rate. And any way that we can offset that, slow that down, we're going to offset the risk of frailty, disability, and falls and fractures when you get to those ages that it is worrying. It is going to become a risk factor. So I know we're all massively interested in keeping our bodies looking well with social media and all these things these days, and even in people in the ages of 40 to 60 and so on are very interested in that as well. And sometimes they might see the benefits of their body fat changing per se, but they should always remember that they're getting massive health benefits just by doing any exercise whatsoever, and all other things like cardiovascular risk factors, blood pressure, etc. But also remember that after the age of 40, your bone and muscle are going down. If you do any weight-bearing activities, you're going to slow down the risk of ever having problems further down the line. I think that's really important to note for any individual.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose that then comes into a little bit. I don't know if you collected the data, or I don't know if you know why. But so when you think it was 80 odd % of your participant group were still participating in resistance or aerobic type exercise. What about the other 20 or so %? Do you know what it is that stopped them or put them off being able to carry on with exercise?
That's a good question. Unfortunately, we don't have the data to show that, but what we do have the data is of the 86% that did keep performing, we asked them why. And a large percent of them reported to both being their perception of the health benefits and the social element. So combined, their feeling of a better sense of coherence, taking part in the trial, and they know the health benefits now they're getting out of it is one of the reasons, and the social element, which I said to you at the start, was the other driving factor. So what we can take from this is a group of older adults that were physically untrained, above the age of 65, we can get them to exercise and perform strength training, and albeit functional exercise as well, and they will continue it further down the line, or at least our data suggests that. And that can save a hell of a lot of money and uphold their quality of life.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing as well, isn't it? The quality of life will just be better as well. It's not just about getting bigger or getting stronger. It's, as you said at the very start, it's about things like getting out of a chair or being able to play with the grandchildren or anything like that. It's all these little parts of life that would be much easier or much more accessible.
Definitely, and when you become more physically impaired, let's say, and I've even seen it with my grandmother when she was about 75. She's very active, and just as she's creeped in now to the 8th decade of life, over the age of 80, her activity levels have really gone down, and you can see over that space of 5 or 6 years, her mobility is suddenly becoming a lot worse, and she's doing less of the things that she used to do. So you can see, even in what I would call my grandmother, a healthier older adult, very quickly she could reach a threshold. I can see that she suddenly won't be able to do much. So yeah, it's a social element. If we can get older adults to continue because of that and do some kind of group exercise, or make gyms around the UK that I know they're starting in some places in Australia and America that are designed for, let's say, over the age of 50, and they can continue to do that. Because we know as well that unfortunately some people become widowed as they age, and when that happens, some of them also go into shock, and that's why the onset of Alzheimer's can come on, and these conditions. So it's about keeping them socially and psychologically engaged with other individuals in their age category, and that is another benefit of exercise. If we get them in these group settings, we can do that. So that's, in my opinion, what the public health should be concentrating on around the UK, both for their quality of life, but to save the public health and the NHS billions and billions if they could do this. And we've shown it. People that never exercised before suddenly can actually enjoy it and get health benefits from it.
Yeah, I think you're right there in terms of what you mentioned, even about gyms specifically for older populations, because I'm just thinking of me and Ben go to the same gym, and I'm just thinking of the gym that we go to. It's full of 20 to maybe 30, 35-year-olds lifting big, heavy weights, taking pictures, posing for Instagram. I think me and you've been guilty of that a couple of times. But it would be an intimidating place, wouldn't it? Even if you were a group of older adults, it would be potentially intimidating, or even if it wasn't intimidating, just not somewhere that an older person would maybe want to go and train. It's not an inviting place.
No, definitely. I completely agree with you. And that's the same feedback that we got from our population that we worked with, that not all of them said they would dislike it, but they, overall, I can say that they would prefer to be exercising as a group by themselves with their own age category, or even from, like I mentioned, from the age of 50 above.
Yeah.
From the age of 50 above. Yeah.
No, I think it's great. So what about for you now then, Ben? So the study's been published, PhD has been done, ticked off. What's next on the agenda for you?
Well, yeah. So as you know, they're only little small goals in the in the research world, just things that you have to do. So yeah, I was pleased by both of them. So I'm going on now to study at the Australian Institute for Musculoskeletal Science, which is located in Melbourne. So it's in the Department of Medicine at the University of Melbourne. And we are going to look at osteosarcopenia, which is a combination really of two diseases, which is osteoporosis, is bone loss, and then what I've talked about, sarcopenia, which is muscle loss. So osteoporosis is to bone, what sarcopenia is to muscle. And now we've shown, or other researchers, prominent researchers in this field, have shown that these two diseases actually overlap. And there's some preliminary data showing that when you have these two diseases, you're more at risk of injuries, falls, and fractures, and all the obvious negative things. So we're going to look at, through different clinical trials, various aspects, both relating to environmental, so exercise, different nutritional strategies, and also we're going to look at pharmacology and see what different types of drugs. So I can't really go into specific details, but they're the areas. It's osteosarcopenia, muscle and bone loss, and then we're going to look at how exercise, nutrition, perhaps pharmacology may play a role in diagnosed patients. So really I'm going from a bit more, I would say, healthy aging and preventing these conditions to individuals that have real frailty and real carry these conditions, and what we can do to manage them and look at the mechanisms behind these diseases as well.
Yeah, I suppose, like you said, it's almost the more extreme end of what could or will happen if you go down that path of inactivity and muscle wastage and bone loss.
Definitely, yeah. And it's gone from a point now where I was massively interested, I still am obviously, in the science behind muscle loss and what happens to the muscle as it goes through the lifespan. And I'm going to learn more about bone now in that area. But it's got to the point now where actually I see the impact it can make on society and an adult in this age category, how it can help them, mature adults. And I'm actually very passionate about now helping older adults. So it's going from kind of the sciencey stuff to I want to do impactful stuff that can actually have an impact on these older adults and help them going forward.
No, Ben, that sounds fantastic. Look, I think we're just about coming up to time here. Before we finish, where's the best place for people to keep up with you and keep up with the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so probably on my Twitter platform is where I share tweets surrounding aging, muscle, bone, etc. What we can do to hold on to this and prevent mobility disability. So that's at Benny Kirk, BENNIKIRK. Also, my ResearchGate has some publications. I am only a early career researcher, so not that many yet. But you can find some of them on that relating to this study. Or if you just look on my Google Scholar, if you typed in Ben Kirk, I'm sure my publications will come up there. And anybody that's interested in this area or wants to reach out with a question, I do always reply to people and stuff if they do want to ask anything.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I think that's the best thing as well. Sometimes you just get these random questions or people get in touch, and that's where ideas come from, or collaborations and stuff like that. So the more people that get in touch with questions and things, I think the better, and the more likely we are to ask the right questions.
Yeah, definitely. And I know both of us wanted it from this, or you did at least, was talk about the practical element of all of this. What does actually this mean in practice? But if there is more scientific areas people want to ask what's actually happening behind the surface in muscle, then by all means get in touch.
Yeah, you're definitely right. It's a good thing you said that. Like, so as much as we've spoken really practically and maybe a bit simply here, Ben is definitely the man if you want to get into some of the mechanisms, the molecular side of this. So you can't enjoy the sun in Australia when he's there.
Exactly.
Okay. Ben, it's awesome to talk, mate. We'll catch up properly soon. But for now, thank you everyone for listening, and we'll speak again soon.
Thanks for having me on, Jay.
Cheers, Ben.